One of my favorite Bible characters is Peter. For those of you who might not know who Peter was, he was one of the disciples. He was one of the 12. He's kind of one of the main disciples in the story of Jesus. And he's also one of the people in the Bible I identify with the most. He's young, he's ambitious, he doesn't always make the right decisions. He sometimes speaks and before he thinks, or he acts before he has a chance to think about what he's going to do, as I'm sure many of you guys can probably relate to. And this is part of the reason why I really like Peter. There's a story, one of my favorite stories of Peter is in Matthew chapter 17, if you have a moment to turn there. And it's a story called the Transfiguration. Some of you might be familiar with it. Some of you might not be. Let me refresh your memories for those of you who might have trouble remembering it. So it's basically the story of Jesus decides to take Peter, James, and John. They're kind of like the three favorite disciples. And he takes his three favorite and he takes them up to the top of a mountain. I guess, I don't know, they were going up there to have some male bonding. I don't know what the plan was. And they get up to the top of the mountain, and then, like, bam! You see, like, light coming down. Jesus' face is shining. He's wearing white robes. And then, poof! You got Elijah and Moses standing there. And I struggle to think of what I would do in this situation. I mean, you think you're just walking around, you're talking with Jesus, and then bam! Light shining. I imagine there were angels singing or something like that. And then you got Elijah and you got Moses standing right there. And if you were Peter, James, and John, this would be like the craziest thing in the world. Elijah and Moses were some of the biggest heroes of the Old Testament. I guarantee you, Peter, James, and John all had Elijah and Moses jammies when they were growing up. All right? This is like if you were with your mentor or a teacher, somebody you really respect, and then bam, Batman, Superman are standing right there. And you're just like, what do you do in that situation? I know I would probably wet myself or do something embarrassing. And Peter kind of does the same thing. So if you have a minute, like I said, we're in Matthew chapter 17. Read verse 4. It says, Peter says to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. So Peter's first response to Jesus shining and going crazy, and then Elijah and Moses showing up out of nowhere is like, hey guys, you want some tents? I can run down to Bass Pro Shop. I'll be back in about an hour, and then we can have a campfire, and we'll have like a guys' weekend or something. I don't know, but. All this to say is that Peter wasn't necessarily the sharpest tool. But at the same time, Peter was a great disciple. Peter does some awesome things in the Bible. He walks on water with Jesus. He preaches a sermon on Pentecost where thousands of people come to follow Jesus. He was the first pope. I mean, it's pretty cool, right? And kind of what we're going to begin into here in just a minute is Peter's decisive moment. The moment where he chose to go all in for Jesus. And some of you who are here this weekend, you've had that decisive moment. You've had that moment where you've decided to go all in on Jesus. But some of you haven't. And I want to challenge you tonight and this weekend as we go along in this retreat. I want to challenge you to think about how you can go all in, how you can have that decisive moment. The term "the decisive moment" was coined by a famous photographer, Henri Cartier-Bresson. He's French; you have to pronounce it like that. And the decisive moment is this idea that this is when you capture the perfect moment, and when you take that picture. The light is perfect. The subject is perfect. It's this idea that this moment in time has never happened before and it will never happen again. There are a few decisive moments we have in our lives. And some of them are your own choosing, and some of them are chosen for you. And some of them are good, or some of them are bad. Some of you may have had a moment where you chose to go all in on a sport or musical instrument or some kind of hobby or something that you're really into. And some of you may have made a decision to say or do something that you got in trouble for. And you knew you were going to get in trouble as soon as you said and did it. But you had that decisive moment. You see, the story of Peter is the story of somebody who chooses to follow Jesus. And we're going to look at that specific moment here in Matthew chapter 16. So if you had your Bible open to Matthew 17, just go ahead and just turn back one page. It's Matthew chapter 16, verse 13. It says, "When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, 'Who do people say the Son of Man is?' They replied, 'Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets.' 'But what about you?' he asked. 'Who do you say I am?' Simon Peter answered, 'You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God.' Jesus replied, 'Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it.'" Did you catch it? We'll go back, verses 15 and 16. It says, "What about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered him, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." You are the Messiah. Those were dangerous words. Peter knew what he was saying when he said those words. At this time, the area of Jerusalem and the area of Israel was occupied by the Romans. There had been other messiahs. There had been people who had come and who had said that they were going to overthrow the Romans. They gathered armies. They led mobs. And they attempted to overpower the greatest superpower in the world at the time. And every single one of them ended up dead. Ended up dying for what they believed in, all of their followers as well. When Peter says the words, "You are the Messiah," he is making a political and dangerous statement. He's having a decisive moment. An example I can think of in our own American history was July 4th, 1776. Independence Day, right? Today we celebrate 4th of July. We celebrate with barbecues and pool parties and fireworks in the sky. But if you were in that room, when those men, our founding fathers, placed that pen to that paper, it was a decisive moment. There was no going back. In a lot of ways, they knew if they lost the war, they were signing their own death warrant. It was a somber moment. It wasn't one of victory. It wasn't one of rejoicing. It wasn't one of being happy. I was reading up on this last night, and one of the history resources I was found, they said that they were while they were signing the Declaration, they were having gallows humor. One of the founding fathers made a joke that because he was fat, he was going to die faster, and it was serious. By them signing this document, there was no turning back. There was no going back to how things used to be. You see, in this passage, Jesus is starting to place his flag in the ground. He's saying, "This is who I am." But he does it through Peter's realization. This is kind of the hinge of the gospel. Everything leading up to this point and everything after is different. This is kind of the point in the story of Matthew where Jesus is heading down to Jerusalem. He's heading to the cross. He knows what's coming. But first he has Peter, who says, "You are the Messiah." It was a decisive moment in his life. I went skydiving once. Anybody been skydiving? I went skydiving one time. Spoiler alert, I made it. And when you go skydiving, there's a whole process. You don't just show up and get on the plane and jump out. You pay them money. You fill out way too much paperwork. You watch safety videos. You kind of learn what the equipment is. You get dressed up, and you walk to the plane, and then you fly up in a plane. It's the weirdest feeling when you're going up in a plane and you realize you're not going to land in the plane. And the whole time you're just nervous. The whole time you're just getting more and more anxious. But it's simultaneously terrifying and exciting. And then comes the moment, the scariest moment I had of my whole skydiving experience. Wasn't the falling, it wasn't actually making the jump. The scariest moment was when I stuck my feet out the plane. Because there's everything inside of you is telling you this is a bad idea. And then comes the moment. You either do it or you don't. You either jump or you chicken out. And once you make that decision, there's no going back. You don't get to, gravity is a one-way. It's a one-way road, right? It's a one-way trip. And I remember that moment once I decided to jump, and I was falling, going fast, terminal velocity. First of all, it's super cool, and it's weird. You're just want to scream, but then air dries out in your mouth. It's this crazy story. But as you're falling, it's weird because all the anxiousness, all the nerves, they go away. Because the parachute's going to open one way or another. It's either going to open or it's not going to open. So you might as well enjoy the ride when you're going down, right? So that's the decisive moment that we're looking to have this weekend. Are you going to jump? Are you going to make that leap? And the truth is, some of you guys, you might not. Some of you guys are still on the ground. Some of you guys are still filling out paperwork. Some of you guys are learning how to pull the ripcord. And there might be one or two of you guys who have made the jump, who are free falling now, who are enjoying the ride. But we're all on this faith journey differently, and we all have different moments of decisive decisions. And this weekend is all about making those decisions together. About saying, even though we're on different points along this path, we're trying to imagine what would happen if we all decided to jump. If we all decided to make that commitment. Imagine what would happen in your life, in your family, in your school, in your church, in your work, if you decided to commit to Jesus. If you decided to say, you are the Messiah. It's a dangerous decision. But it's also exhilarating. It's also fun. It's also a way to live the way that God intended you to live. And imagine what would happen if we all made that decision. Imagine what would happen if we chose to make a difference for Jesus. This weekend is about dreaming big. It's about thinking about possibilities. It's about making plans. I just want to challenge you. Have you made that decisive decision? Have you had that decisive moment in your life? And if you haven't, think about what would happen if we all did it together. Let's pray. Dear Jesus, thank you for